Who is God? Over the last 2 centuries, the very rapid progress of humanity has not only opened new windows of knowledge for human beings but has also increased our level of welfare in all aspects of life. For the vast majority of human beings, it is quite difficult to even imagine traveling to the past and living in a time when many of our present achievements have not yet occurred. This, of course, is mainly since many of these achievements have brought us welfare. On the contrary, some of these achievements have limited our perspective of the changing world around us and have even blinded us from the truths set before our eyes. Therefore, understanding these events will be a truly astounding moment in all of human life. These events are even more massive and amazing than all the miracles that humanity has ever understood. These are the first moments of this baby's life. The parents congratulate the baby on his birth. She is a weak being, who is entirely dependent on her parents. In her view, the strongest and best people to rely on are her parents, who could always support her. But time passes quickly for her, and she grows fast. As time passes, this child, who is now a child of a few years old, the world gets extensive and the question arises in her mind, how did my parents create me? She first believes that her parents made her. However, time will change this view because she will soon realize that her birth was a natural event and that her parents did not play a significant role. In addition, her parents, like her, need support. As she grows older into a teenager, the world around her grows even more extensively and her understanding of her surroundings expands, which forms other questions in her mind. Since it is complicated for her to believe that her creation is based on natural events, except that there is no logical reason for her presence in this world, and understands that she was born without any purpose, which makes life meaningless for her. With her intellectual development, these questions become more and more. For example, could she have been created by a supernatural being? Where does this creature live? What does he look like? Is there a God at all? And is it possible to be seen with the human eye? How old is he? Who are his parents? How many children does he have? What are the names of his children? Does this God have a brother or sister? And so on. Interestingly, these questions may have formed in the minds of each of us, some of them still unanswered. The purpose of this study is only to present some current views and interpret a few world events without biasing your thoughts, because in my opinion, if the worship of God is mandatory, it is no different from slavery, just as obedience without reason in religion is no different from slavery. It doesn't matter who I am, however, I strongly believe you guys will enjoy this mini documentary, so please stay tuned. Belief in the existence of a God has been common in ancient civilizations since a very long time ago, and the nature and attributes of the God in these civilizations have been variable. In some of these civilizations, they believed in the existence of a God who could be seen. For example, in ancient Egyptian culture, people worshipped idols they had made, and the pharaoh, who denied God's existence, introduced himself as God. In ancient Egypt, cows and crocodiles were also worshipped. Cows, mice, and snakes were revered in the Hindu civilization and are still revered to this day. Bears are worshipped in eastern Russia and goats in Nepal. The divine religions perform other forms of worship of God, such as Muslims, Jews, and Christians, who believe in a formless God. Darwinism is another type of view of God that has gathered the most evidence, which is based on the evolution hypothesis. Consequently, many of the statements of this hypothesis are the basis of biology today. Darwin's hypothesis contradicts the views of creationism that believe that man was created from soil, and the followers of the evolutionary theory believe that the divine religions have had false prophets and magicians. This hypothesis does not deny the existence of God, but rather, is only based on contradicting the view of the divine religions that believe and worship an imaginary God. Even some evolutionists believe that humanity is God. This belief is based on the idea that this world was created by early human ancestors and can be changed and occupied by humans. Another type of view of God is that of those who believe that this world existed from the beginning and has no need for a God. The basis of this view is that this world is so vast that no creature can create it. In other words, these people can't imagine the existence of a God in this world. But what has led to the desire to worship God among different cultures throughout history? A look at the history of various civilizations shows an innate tendency among men to worship. The need that makes people build immense and beautiful temples around the globe. The need in some of these civilizations led to animals such as cows, sheep, and sometimes even humans to be sacrificed to their god. The need caused objects such as idols to be worshipped as gods. In many societies, this need has profound effects on the type of social relationships. To put it into perspective, the degree of competence and the social status of individuals, based on this view of God and the way of looking at this world, is formed in the vision of these societies. Despite their different views of God, all of these beliefs, due to their inherent need to worship, shows the greatness and interpretation of this world. But why do some people believe that this world existed from the beginning and has no God? According to this view, it can be claimed that the Great Pyramid of Khufu, which is one of the 7 wonders, was not created by man and was created by the pressure of the Earth's tectonic plates. However, 2,560 years before Christ, 2,300,000 pieces of stone weighing 2.5 tons had been used in the construction of a building with a height of 146.5 meters, which seems to be impossible. As a result, archaeologists believe that thousands upon thousands of slave men have lost their lives building it. Even the basis of the evolutionary hypothesis is questioned without considering the role of God. In short, evolutionists believe that the ancestor of all living things came into being more than 3.5 billion years ago with a series of reactions, some around the hygrothermal vent in the depths of the oceans and some in the bubble of Earth's atmosphere in adjacent of UV light of the sun or lightning. In this series of completely spontaneous reactions and with no external factors playing a role in their formation, the first biomolecules such as amino acids and nucleic acids were formed. Then these biomolecules formed the first macromolecules due to random and completely spontaneous reactions. Afterward, macromolecules were formed that were able to replicate and perform some of their metabolic reactions. Eventually, the first living species were formed with the encapsulation of these macromolecules in the phospholipid bilayer membrane. Due to the instability of the genetic material, these living species have been prone to mutations and biodiversity. Later, photosynthetic cyanobacteria were formed. Then the first eukaryotic species with intracellular and specialized organelles for performing their biological reactions was formed. Subsequent mutations led to the formation of new species from their predecessors. Over time, early multicellular organisms formed, and then complex multicellular organisms formed from their ancestors. Over time, mutations and hybridization between species led to the formation of new species such as plants, insects, amphibians, reptiles such as dinosaurs, and mammals. Primates are derived from their mammalian ancestors. Eventually, early humans evolved from their primate ancestors. The most significant disagreement between the followers of the evolutionary hypothesis and the divine religions is whether the man was created from clay or the continuation of the evolutionary process from primates. In this documentary, I do not intend to reject the hypothesis of evolution because this hypothesis is based on solid evidence and this hypothesis is the basis of biology. Also, this is just a theory that was neither absolutely rejected nor conclusively proven. Nevertheless, this hypothesis has enormous gaps that make it challenging to accept regardless of God. For example, the two followers of this theory, Stanley Miller and Harold Urey, wanted to mimic the basic conditions in which the raw materials for the creation of life were formed in the laboratory to prove the possibility of the formation of the first biological materials at the beginning of the origin of life. In this experiment, methane, molecular hydrogen, ammonia, and steam found around the hydrothermal vent in the deep ocean evaporated and then adjacent to lightning or UV light after 1 week. These materials were formed into some biological raw materials such as amino acids like alanine and glycine or nucleic acids. However, they unintentionally proved the existence of a god. The followers of this hypothesis believe that these reactions occurred entirely spontaneously, and therefore, this reaction should have been without any interference and only through observation, but these scientists inadvertently played the role of God in this experiment. Or, for example, the followers of the evolutionary theory believe that all the events of the formation of life on Earth, the initial construction of the planet, the position of the Earth in the solar system as well as its distance from the Sun, were based entirely on coincidental events. Let's take a look at the position of planet Earth in the solar system to find some critical points about this. Earth is the third planet in the solar system, located between Venus and Mars. The distance from the Earth to the Sun is about 150 million kilometers. The importance of this distance is understandable when you realize that due to the distance of 108 million kilometers from Venus to the Sun, its surface temperature is 475 degrees Celsius. Due to these high temperatures, most of the planet's surface metals melt, and all surface water evaporates, making life impossible to form on its surface. Moreover, due to the distance of 216 million kilometers from Mars to the Sun, the surface temperature of this planet is -60 degrees Celsius. Due to the freezing of water on this planet, it is not possible to form an atmosphere on it, and life on its surface will be much more difficult. But to date, no trace of life has been found on the surface of Mars. If this distance between the Earth and the Sun decreases, the Earth's surface temperature reaches a point where all the water on the Earth's surface evaporates, and then the planet's atmosphere disappears. Also, if this distance increases, all the water on the Earth's surface will freeze, and due to the lack of water vapor, it will be impossible to form the current atmosphere. In either case, life on Earth becomes impossible. The basis of the evolutionary theory depends entirely on the existence of water and the Earth's atmosphere. Also, due to the presence of planets such as the Moon, Mars, and Jupiter around the Earth, the possibility of asteroids and meteorites hitting planet Earth is greatly reduced. The important point here is that even though these celestial bodies are very unlikely to collide, they have caused mass extinctions during the lifetime of planet Earth. The Earth's atmosphere consists of 5 layers, which play an important role in sustaining life on Earth. The lowest layer of the atmosphere is the troposphere and contains most gases including nitrogen, oxygen, argon, and carbon dioxide, which of them are involved in the formation of the first biological molecules. The next layer is the stratosphere, which due to the presence of the ozone layer in this layer, absorbs a large part of the UV light of the Sun and neutralizes its harmful effects. The next layer is the mesosphere, where a large part of the meteorites we observe in the night sky is located. The next layer is the thermosphere, which absorbs high-energy X-rays. The outermost layer of the atmosphere is the exosphere, which is the boundary between the atmosphere and space. Considering these conditions and considering the critical principle of evolution, namely the random variable distribution, is one of the laws of probability. If someone tossed a coin with infinite charge, the probability of landing on the head or tail is infinitely close to 1/2, which indicates that this event is random or spontaneous. But if this value changes to either of these two sides set of a coin, heads or tails, it indicates that an external factor has caused a change in this value. The challenges of the evolutionary theory are revealed when you realize the ability of human intelligence. This ability gives us the power to travel in space. This ability gives us the power to control the energy of collapsing atoms to generate clean energy. This ability allows us to manage diseases and engineer genomes and cells in the direction of improving our life. This ability gives us the capacity that we can use to achieve any goal. Considering the random variables law, almost half of the creatures on the planet should have the same intellectual abilities as humans. Planet Earth contains approximately 8.7 million species, and at least 7,770,000 species of its animals have a brain with low-level intelligence. However, this ability exists only in humans, which indicates the possibility of a different creation of humans. Another challenge of the evolutionary theory is based on data collected by NASA's Kepler. In November of 2013, scientists announced that about 40% of stars, or about 2/5, have an Earth-sized planet in an orbit closer than Mercury is to our Sun. The Milky Way has about 100 billion stars, so this would suggest at least 40 billion Earth-sized planets in our galaxy. Kepler also discovered more than 2,600 extrasolar planets in the Milky Way, many of which could be promising places to live. Furthermore, NASA estimates that the observable universe contains about 200 billion galaxies, that within any one of them there could at least be billions of planets like Earth, and the chances of life forming on many of these planets are equal to planet Earth. If on average each galaxy has about 2,600 planets like the planet Earth, multiplying the number of visible galaxies by the number of planets in each galaxy gives a very enormous number, which according to the law of random variable distribution, half of these planets should contain life. In other words, the world should be full of living planets now. But researchers' efforts to find signs of life in the world have so far failed. This is similar to the role played by Stanley Miller and Harold Urey in simulating the initial conditions of the formation of the first biological materials. But which of these four views about God is correct? The God that is seen or the God that is not seen? Or is there no God at all? Or are the first human ancestors the creators of this world? At first glance, you may notice a commonality between these views, the desire to worship, but the difference between these views is so drastic that it has a profound effect on intellectual orientation, vision, and hope for the future. This view can give a person a purpose in life, or conversely, a person may feel frustrated. What makes man sometimes worship his handmade objects or animals that are much weaker than man? Is it because of their insufficient knowledge? This view is based on the idea that everything that is not seen does not exist, and despite man's natural need for worship, man tends to worship a God who was made by himself or worships creatures weaker than himself. Or, by denying God's existence, they tend to be selfish. Is it true that there is nothing that cannot be seen? But human experience in accessing various sciences proves otherwise. Scientists study the properties of invisible objects by examining the effects that invisible things have on the environment and vice versa. For example, even though scientists could not see the three-dimensional structure of the DNA molecule with their own eyes, they designed it by using X-ray imaging of a DNA crystal, which showed only a shadow of a DNA molecule on photographic imaging and was similar to this image. Scientists have never seen the three-dimensional structure of atoms with their own eyes. However, by studying the wavelength spectrum of absorbed light and the emission of atoms of each element that is specific to that element, other studies were able to examine and model the atomic structure of different elements. Black holes are one of the most controversial wonders of space. Maybe when you hear the name black hole, you imagine a hole in space with nothing inside. But this is not true. Black holes are the result of the collapse of stars at the end of their lives. After this collapse, the inner parts of the star are compressed to such an extent that the resulting gravitational force creates curvature in the surrounding space, and nothing can escape this gravity, not even light. For years, the only knowledge scientists had about the existence of black holes was only based on mathematical and physical calculations, until scientists built new telescopes that can detect the presence and location of black holes based on X-rays emitted by black holes. With the help of these new telescopes, scientists gained the ability to determine the location and some other characteristics of black holes in space. However, scientists still cannot see black holes. More interestingly, scientists have very little knowledge of photons of light because scientists study the phenomenon of this world using light waves at different wavelengths. There is still no method to study the light itself. Is it possible, without seeing God, to examine his existence by examining his creation and identifying his attributes? Let's find the answers to our questions. If it is possible to discover something without seeing it by examining the impact that it has on the environment or the effects that the environment has on it, then it is feasible, without seeing God and instead of reviewing its creatures and the results that God has on the creatures, to realize the existence of God and His traits. The world we live in is much larger than what can be seen with the naked eye. The universe is so large that it contains billions upon billions of stars, galaxies, supernovas, black holes, planets, moons, and more. According to astronomers, the last point in space observed by astronomers is 13.7 billion light-years from planet Earth. This is an area of space that the Hubble Space Telescope cannot see beyond. Do you think it is possible to see the past directly with our own eyes every day and night? Every morning the sun shines on all living things on the planet Earth with its life-giving energy. The sun's rays reach the Earth in 8 minutes and 20 seconds by passing a distance of 150 million kilometers between the planet Earth and the sun. Moreover, when we look at the sky every night, we see stars that are thousands and sometimes billions of light-years away from planet Earth. The light that reaches our eyes shows the past of these stars. But what is more interesting, that the light of these stars may have been affected by the gravitational pull of the black holes during their path and resulted in a change in their path, or, if for some reason the star varies, such as the explosion of a supernova, or destroyed or swallowed by a black hole, that point is no longer present. In other words, the world we observe with our own eyes are events in the past of this world, and the world around us now, with what we see even with the most advanced manufactured tools, is not the current events of this world. One of the things that scientists agree on is the Big Bang Theory. According to this theory, scientists say that the universe was formed 13.7 billion years ago by the explosion of an infinitely dense, hot mass about a few millimeters wide. Even imagining the amount of compression and the power of gravity of this infinite dense particle is beyond the human mind, because this particle is the result of compressing the entire universe, even black holes, inside a particle with a diameter of a few millimeters. And as soon as this explosion began, space, time, matter, and energy began to form. This means that space, time, matter, and energy did not exist before this explosion. Another point is that the farther we are from the center of this explosion, the faster space expands. Imagine seeing an area of space where the speed of expansion is faster than the speed of light. It's like a runner running on a treadmill slower than the treadmill and falling off the treadmill. This means that space is much larger than what astronomers have measured. Of course, this is just my hypothesis and not something I want to discuss. Imagine the universe formed from the explosion of an infinitely compact mass in the absence of matter, energy, space, and time. The question is, how did the raw material for the formation of this universe come into being? Some scientists' answer to the question is that this mass is infinitely compact, resulting from the compaction of the world, similar to the world in which we live today. In other words, this event of compression and explosion has occurred successively in the past. This in itself means that there are parallel worlds like ours that repeatedly compress and explode again. The sum of all these worlds is inside another world, which is much larger than the world we are in, and the scientific events within it will be much more complex than we understand. But what authority can create such worlds parallel to our world, or even a world that contains all these parallel worlds? Do beings who are themselves of this world have the ability to create such compact masses to create worlds parallel to this world of such magnitude? The absolute answer to this question is that the God of these parallel worlds and the world that contains all these parallel worlds must have a power beyond the range of authority of all of the parallel worlds in the world that encompasses all these parallel worlds. Therefore, God is self-dependent, and the qualifications and traits of this God cannot be investigated with the sciences of these worlds. But why is it difficult for us, human beings, to understand eternal life, not having parents, brothers, sisters, spouses, and children, for a God of such greatness? Is it right for a human to generalize his living conditions such as birth, death, having parents, a spouse, and children to the God of these universes? Imagine traveling to another parallel world in which none of the laws of the world live now correspond to the rules of our world. Imagine, for example, that the creatures of this world lived so long that they could not remember when they were born, who their parents were, or whether they had a brother or sister. In this case, it will be impossible for us to even imagine that this God was born one day or will die one day. It will be impossible to understand that this God has a brother, sister, or child. These examples, however, are incomprehensible to us now because we have been an integral part of our daily lives since we were born, and it is impossible to understand laws other than these. Death and life are an essential part of the rules of the world we are in now. We were not the creators of these rules, we just discovered and used them, and if the rules were not fixed and stable, we could not apply them in our lives. But since the God of the universe with this authority has an unlimited capacity to order rules according to his intention, it is not impossible to visualize a world with rules different from the world we currently live in. Imagine a world that formed with an explosion in the place and time, matter and energy, and every event on which man has based his knowledge and studies such as any mathematical and physical rules were natural events such as death and birth, and everything else was formed after the explosion. None of these rules and events existed before the explosion. The interpretation of these statements is that there is only one God because the whole world was formed by just one explosion. Birth and death do not mean anything to God, and none of the agreed rules of man mean anything to him, because he existed before the explosion and any fixed law, as well as before the Big Bang explosion. It is, as the rules of mathematics and physics or even natural rules of the world, for example death and birth, were made by God himself. He does not need a child because procreation occurs only in the case of mortals who need to survive. Even he does not need his creatures to rule this world, and creatures cannot see God because the rules of this world are not effective to see him. Questions may arise in our minds, such as, why did God create us and all these universes? Has God not intended another world to reward and punish the creatures after death, and with death, the life of the creatures ends? Does such a powerful God need to be worshipped by his creatures? Should God provide a proper way to guide his creatures to achieve a better life? Has he ever determined guides for creatures to achieve a better life, and if so, who are these messengers? These questions and other similar questions in this field will be reviewed in the next sections of this documentary. Wait for the following section of this documentary. If you enjoyed watching this documentary, subscribe to my channel, and to be informed of the following parts of this documentary, click the bell button. Finally, give us your feedback by liking this video and commenting in the comments section below. Once again, thanks for watching this documentary.